All right, so today we're going to get into the story of a technology that honestly completely changed how we think about building for the web. This isn't just a history of some old framework. Nope, it's about a revolutionary idea. One that took the basic language of the web, HTML, and gave it some serious superpowers. This is the story of AngularJS. But, to really get why it was such a big deal, we have to start with a question. Think back to the late 2000s. We all started wanting websites that felt more like apps, right? More interactive, more alive. But developers, they just kept hitting this wall. So what was going on? Why was HTML, the language that built the entire web, suddenly not up to the job? Okay, let's really dig into this. To get why a tool like AngularJS was even needed, you have to look at the very heart of the web itself, HTML. And the problem was a huge mismatch between what HTML was born to do and what we were trying to force it to do. This was HTML's big dynamic dilemma. Here's the best way to think about it. On one hand, HTML was designed to create static documents. Like a page in a book. It's there, you read it, it doesn't really change. But on the other hand, what we all wanted were dynamic applications, web pages that felt as quick and responsive as the software on our computers. It was like trying to build a Formula One car using the blueprints for a horse-drawn carriage. It just wasn't going to work. So what happened? Well, developers ended up having to write just mountains of JavaScript to manually boss the browser around. They had to manipulate something called the Document Object Model, or the DOM, which is basically the live map of the web page. The code was just a long list of commands. Hey, find this button. Now change this text. Okay, now go hide that image over there. It was slow, super easy to mess up, and it created this tangled mess that everyone started calling spaghetti code. And then, in 2010, a totally new way of thinking showed up. Instead of trying to work around HTML, AngularJS did something kind of radical. It decided to just teach HTML some new tricks. It was all about giving plain old HTML some incredible superpowers. And the big idea, the core belief behind it, was this. Instead of writing code that tells the browser how to do everything step by step, you should just declare what you want the end result to look like. You just tell the app, hey, I want the user's name to appear right here. And the framework handles all the messy steps to make that happen. So how did it pull that off? Well, the secret sauce, the real magic, was this thing called two-way data binding. Just think of it like this. Your data, the model, and what the user actually sees on the screen, the view, were perfectly connected. They were always in sync. A user types their name in a box, and poof, the data updates. Your code changes the data, and poof, the screen updates instantly. No more manual work. It was a game changer. And this slide just says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you see the old way, all those tedious steps developers had to write over and over again. And on the right, the AngularJS way, just one simple, clean connection. This was the big aha moment for so many of us. It just felt right. So that all sounds great, but how did this magic actually work under the hood? Let's peel back the layers a bit and look at the core mechanics that made every AngularJS app tick. First things first, it brought some much-needed organization to the chaos of front-end code. It did this by using the Model View Controller Pattern, or MVC. Now, this was pretty common for server-side code, but for JavaScript in the browser, it was huge. It gave you separate boxes to put things in, one for your data, the model, one for your UI, the view, and one for all your logic, the controller. Everything had its place. And the glue that held all these pieces together, that was something called directives. You can think of them as new words added to the HTML language. I mean, look at these. ng model was the key to that two-way data binding we just talked about. ng repeat, you could just point it at a list of data and bam, it would create a whole list on your page automatically. You were literally teaching HTML how to do new things. So when you fired up an AngularJS app, it would kick off this three-step process to bring everything to life. First, it would set up something called an injector to manage all your different code pieces. Then it would scan through your HTML and compile it, looking for all those special directives. And finally, it would link everything up, connecting the data and the logic to the UI, and your application would just spring to life. Of course, like any great story, this one has a beginning, a middle, and an end. AngularJS had its incredible rise, a time when it was on top of the world, and eventually its decline. So let's walk through the full life cycle of this framework. So it came out of Google back in 2010, and it just took off. By about 2014, you couldn't escape it. It was the A in the famous mean stack, which was everywhere. But then in 2016, something happened that sent a shockwave through the whole community. The team announced a total rewrite called Angular 2 that would be completely incompatible with the old one. Fast forward to January 2022, and that was it. Official support for AngularJS version 1 was over. Which, of course, leads to the big question, right? If this thing was so popular, so beloved, why on earth would you just throw it all away and start from scratch? What led to the rewrite? Well, ironically, its greatest superpower was also its Achilles heel. To make that magical data binding happen, AngularJS used something called a digest cycle. You can imagine it like a security guard that has to check every single door in a giant skyscraper over and over just to see if anything's changed. In a small building, no problem. But in a massive, complex app with thousands and thousands of things to watch, that process became a huge performance problem, and it could grind the whole app to a halt. But here's the thing. The story doesn't end there with performance problems or an end-of-life date. No way. To really get the full picture, you have to look at what it left behind. Let's talk about the enduring, massive legacy of AngularJS. Look at this list. AngularJS didn't necessarily invent all of these things, but it absolutely brought them into the mainstream. It's the reason we build single-page applications by default now. It taught a whole generation of us about dependency injection. And those core ideas, declarative UIs, data binding, they were so powerful that they went on to influence basically every major framework that came after it. We're talking React, Vue, all of them. And that's really the bottom line here. You might not be writing AngularJS code today, but if you're building for the modern web, you're absolutely using its ideas. Its architectural DNA it's everywhere. It's baked into the tools we all use every single day. Which kind of leaves you with one last question to chew on. Yeah, its official support is over. The name is retired. But if the core ideas it fought for are now just the standard, accepted way we build things for the web, did AngularJS really end? Or did it just win and become a part of everything else?